I'm surely dreaming, ayy. Just look at what Burns achieving, ayy. 20 pro skater, I'm gonna grind. Not one opportunity I will decline. I show up early like people time. Jokes and truth, I jot in the rhyme. Chicano house to Omatsu now. To a song with y'all in his papa's house. A182 San Diego. Become a legend in the valley like Danny Trejo. This is what I had to do. This is Valley View. This is what I had to do. This is Valley View. We sing it like, eh, eh. So what you want? So sing it like, eh, eh. So what you want? So like, eh, eh. So what you want? So sing it like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want?
Oh, yes, folks. It is about that time. We're back. Top of the hour here on Valley Views. This is your host, Hector. We have with us Carlos Sanchez, our co-host. Carlos, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you
Excellent.
guys?
Doing well. And also we have with us here Kaina Collins, who's our special co-host as well. How you doing, Kaina?
What up? I'm doing well.
Excellent. Good to have you guys here in the studio. And just wanted to thank all of our past and current sponsors of Valley Views here on KROJ. And today we are running part of our special series here called the Meet the Candidates 2022 series, and wanted to go ahead and bring in our next guest here with us. We're talking about Shervin Aazami, everybody, who is a candidate for U.S. Congress here in the San Fernando Valley District 32. First of all, good morning, Shervin. How are you this morning?
Good morning, y'all. Hey, San Fernando Valley. Persian New Year. Happy Persian New Year, y'all.
Ooh,
Nowruz Piruz to all our Persian listeners.
Oh, beautiful. And I love that. That's another thing I love about Valley Views is like being able to, introduce folks to new cultures or bridge that and highlight that, uplift that. So thank you for that, Shervin. And we're going to go ahead and just get started here because, we have about 20 minutes here with you. We want to make sure we get as much as we can out there to let the folks here, our audience, know a little bit more about your campaign. So with that said, Carlos has a first question for you.
Hi, and I wanted to ask, what made you want to run for office?
Appreciate that question. It's a great place to start. I'm a father, husband, immigrant, and public health activist. Grew up here in Canoga Park in Chatsworth, son of Iranian asylum seekers who fled religious persecution. Watched my parents make every sacrifice to build a better life. I always say that I learned the power of responsibility from my mother and the power of service from my father and every struggle that they went through. And before running for office, I was working on Capitol Hill, legislative director for the only national indigenous healthcare nonprofit, where, I'm proud to say that through advocacy, we got more bills passed in 2 years. Bills that canceled copays and deductibles for our Native veterans, guaranteed long-term funding for our community health centers, addressed everything from opioid overdose prevention to maternal health, HIV prevention, and so much more. And I thought to myself, these issues are happening in our communities and only getting worse. And we got so much done in just 2 years. And I think to myself, our communities deserve an unapologetic, corporate-free progressive advocate. Because so much in our communities, from housing to climate to education, immigration, and so much more, are not being addressed in the way that we know we could achieve in terms of the reforms had we actually elected corporate-free progressive advocates, people who are not going to bow down to political cowardice or corporate greed, but actually going to fight with and for the people for these important policies.
Oh yeah, that's a lot going on there. We want to kind of dive a little deeper on that.
Please.
And with that, kind of has the next question.
Yeah, so you just kind of talked about that, but all over social media it says that you're a public health activist, and you just talked about, what you did previously in the last 2 years. So moving forward, how do you want to advocate for healthcare? What are the things that you see in the future that you can do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we're coming out of the worst public health crisis in over a century, right? Where close to 1 million Americans have died. Millions more have lost their employer-sponsored healthcare, lost their wages, lost their jobs. And this should be our clarion call for a universal single-payer Medicare for all system. This is something that would finally guarantee coverage for all Americans, documented or undocumented. It would allow folks to stick with the doctor they want, get full coverage for everything from pediatric care to maternal health care to primary care to specialty care. And those are important things, considering that more and more Americans are going bankrupt because they can't afford the prescription drugs, they can't afford their basic medical supplies. We got 1 in 5 Americans that are straddled with medical debt to the tune of $140 billion. I mean, we're living here in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, and we got folks setting up GoFundMes to pay for their health care because they had a car accident or their family member had an emergency. I mean, those things should not be happening here in America. And I think we are past due to enact single payer. We had AB 1400 here in the state of California. Was very disappointed to not see that pass in the state assembly for lots of reasons, but we still got to get it done here and at the national level. And it's only going to require actually having real advocates, people who have done this work, and someone like myself who's a public health activist. What that means is making sure all of our environments have those basic needs met, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Housing, healthcare, clean air and water, good education. Those are things that actually keep us safe, that rebuild our economy, and that improve our national security.
Yeah, and speaking of that, that you bring up Maslow's, right, and also talking about like just specifically on housing.
Yes.
As we've seen, not just here in California, of course, here in the San Fernando Valley, in District 32, right, but really across the nation. We've seen it in major cities, the lack of affordable housing.
That's right.
Just prices in general for whether you're trying to rent or even purchase, a home. How do you think, like you yourself, becoming a U.S. representative in Congress, you would help our communities deal with and tackle the crisis really with affordable housing?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. We got at least 500,000 people nationwide living on the streets on any given night. Here in Los Angeles, by the last metrics, over 60,000 unhoused in the county, roughly 44,000 in the city. And those are all underestimates, right? And we think to ourselves, we got 5 unhoused neighbors dying per day in our city, more unhoused folks who die of hypothermia here in LA than in San Francisco and New York City combined. And we have a glut of affordable housing, like you just mentioned. Average rent could be over $3,000. How can you afford that even if you're making $15 an hour? That's leaving our teachers behind. It's leaving our nurses behind. It's leaving our sanitation workers behind. And same thing with buying a home. Median home price here in the Valley is close to $1 million. That's leaving so many working class and middle class folks behind, and it's only increasing over time. It was right around the time of the Great Recession in '08 that my parents bought their first house. And, my mom was not being paid at work. Neither was my father. And, I was writing letter after letter to Wells Fargo, urging them not to foreclose our home. And we were one of the lucky ones. Millions of Americans weren't. And it was back then I thought to myself, why is the word luck even associated with something as basic a need as housing? And that's when I delved more into policy, learned how, in response to that, as opposed to our lawmakers pushing for housing as a human right, pushing for permanent supportive housing, instead we opened the floodgates for Wall Street private equity firms, corporate landlords to swoop in, buy these foreclosed homes, buy these apartment complexes for pennies on the dollar, and maximize their profits, and price out working class, middle class folks being able to afford this basic survival need. So in terms of addressing it, there are a lot of policies, a lot of austerity at the federal level when it comes to housing. There's an amendment called the Faircloth Amendment that's been around since the Clinton era that has barred federal financing for construction of new public housing for over 2 decades. When you look at some of the most important federal housing programs like Section 8, they've lost funding when adjusted for inflation over the past decade. And it's no surprise then that here in LA, 1 in 10 Angelenos that are eligible for Section 8 are not able to receive it because it's so chronically underfunded. And on top of that, at the federal level, our anti-discrimination laws are not strong enough to bar landlords from discriminating against folks who are on Section 8 or public services. So we got to fix those problems. We got to fix those gaps. We also got to move towards funding housing as an inherent human right instead of what we're seeing down here, which is further criminalization of poverty, criminalization of houselessness. That's not how we solve these issues. We solve them by investing in people's basic needs, not investing in further oppression, not investing in carceral responses that do not solve the underlying problem, but just perpetuate that trauma.
Yeah, sounds like, there's a lot there that still needs to be done,
Yep.
And of course, making sure that what happens in D.C., has a positive impact here in our neighborhood.
If I may add one more point on that, coming out of this pandemic, last year, President Biden, he authorized the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, to provide local governments 100% federal reimbursement to shelter folks in hotels for the duration of the pandemic. The city of LA never asked for that money. Free federal monies to shelter folks, we never asked for it. And as far as I know, no member of Congress here in LA held our city reps accountable. And it's like, look, we live here in the second largest county government in the country. Folks are obviously focused on what's happening here locally. us as federal candidates and federal reps, what we got to be doing is building that camaraderie, building that solidarity with our city and state officials to say, look, we're all fighting for affordable housing. Let's work together to achieve it. We're fighting for universal health care. Let's work together to achieve it. Not stop working in silos when we recognize that we're all trying to achieve things to improve and empower our residents here at home.
Yeah.
So I have a question about that actually, because running for Congress, I want to know what your ideas are about public safety, because that tends to be a local issue, and yet recently we've seen across the country an uprising, and this being a topic of conversation amongst about police forces, about defunding the police. So as a member of Congress, what can you do about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've never reckoned with our sordid legacy of institutional racism, and that's why it continues to this day. It's baked into our policies. At the federal level, when I think about, with our campaign, our philosophy is this is the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. Poverty is a policy choice, and our budgets are moral documents. And last week, we saw Congress enact a $1.5 trillion funding package for the rest of this fiscal year, 2022. And in that package, 52% of that money went towards the Pentagon, went towards financing endless foreign wars, went towards the military-industrial complex. 52%. And I know, you all have had folks down here talk about how in LA, close to half is going towards LAPD and other services. And that's not the way it should work. And then you compare that to how much we're funding for housing. Housing is 4% of our federal budget. Funding for the Environmental Protection Agency for climate programs is 1%. So all we're doing is investing in further systems of oppression as opposed to investing in the basic needs that actually keep us safe. And we got billions of dollars and federal policing grants and transfers and military weapons to our local police. Why is that happening? Why is there so much militarized equipment coming down to our cops? Just to further oppress our black and brown communities? We're not solving these issues. We're perpetuating the trauma. We got to actually invest and understand that we don't respond to socioeconomic issues with more policing. We respond to it by taking care of our communities, investing in education, in food justice, in healthcare, and housing. Those are the things that actually keep us safe.
Yeah, and just to kind of move into a different direction here, just to get a little bit more. But thank you for that, Carlos. He's one of our intern co-hosts. He's a current senior in high school, and he's about to embark in college. But
congrats, man.
He has a question related to that, though. Yes.
I wanted to ask, how do you plan on assisting with student loan debt as well?
That's such a fantastic question. It's abominable that we got an entire generation of young people who can't buy a home, they can't start a small business, they can't start a family because of straddled canceled student loan debt, including my family, including my wife. And I think to myself how instead of making it easier for kids to go to college by making college universities tuition free, or by fully canceling student debt, instead, what we've seen is our policymakers have made it impossible for folks to discharge their student loan debt in bankruptcy. I mean, that's literally just perpetuating that poverty within our communities. I mean, someone like yourself, I got a cousin too who just turned 19 yesterday. He's in college right now. And I think to myself, how much money are they going to come out with debt for? And why is that the case? We want more folks to go into higher education. We want to make it easier. We want to get rid of the barriers, not impose more. And seeing the cost of college skyrocket, it's shutting more and more people out. And recognizing now that in this world, it's hard to get a living wage job without a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. We got to be facilitating more and more folks to enter the fields they want, whether it's technical college or whether it's a 4-year. We got to facilitate that. Y'all are our future, literally. We got to take care of y'all. Because when we're taking care of you, we're taking care of everyone down the road, taking care of our country down the road. That's the way I see it. And so actually fighting for and enacting and canceling student loan debt and tuition-free public college and university, those are really, really important things we got to do to ensure that your future and our collective future is being taken care of.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then Shervin, maybe we'll turn to Kaina here for this one. But so you're talking about like the future, and of course, part of the folks that help with the future is really our educators, and we're both educators as well. But Kaina has a question related to that as well.
Yeah, that really resonated with me, what you were saying about attracting people into those professions. And right now, it seems like education is under attack.
It
right?
is.
There's issues regarding teaching truth in schools, and there's just a lot of misinformation. So how do you see yourself standing up for public education?
It's just it breaks my heart how much burnout is within our teachers right now. Coming out of everything everything they've done, all the sacrifices they made over the past couple of years, especially with the pandemic, with the shutdowns, teaching over Zoom. I mean, it cannot be easy. I got so much utmost respect for our teachers for every sacrifice they've made. And, we're seeing these headlines that, National Guard is coming in to fill in as substitute teachers because so many teachers have left the job because of burnout or they're not being paid enough. And that's despicable. Our teachers are literally taking care of our future, training our kids to protect us and our economy and our public health, and we're not even giving them a living wage. You and I saw each other at El Camino, my alma mater, and, teachers there who have been working without a contract for over a year. How is that acceptable? We got to get the PRO Act in Congress enacted, but more importantly than that, too, we got to protect our public sector employees, which unfortunately the PRO Act does not do. It covers our private employees, but not our public sector ones. We got to fix that gap. And we got to ensure that all of our teachers have collective bargaining rights. I'll be honest, I got a lot of concerns when it comes to charter schools and infringing on collective bargaining and union rights for our teachers. I got concerns when it comes to transparency and where those funds are being allocated. But more importantly, we got to invest in public education. We got to invest in the arts and drama programs. We got to invest in our teachers and make sure they're being paid living wages, have their full benefits, that time off for self-care, and all the things that actually lead to better improvements within the classroom for our students and our teachers. Because when we don't take care of our teachers, we're also not taking care of our students. They go hand in glove. That's the way I see it, and fighting at the national level to ensure that all of our teachers have union rights, fighting to increase funding for public education, and also address all of the very serious corruption issues when it comes to our charter schools. I think it's going to be really important to make sure that our students and our teachers are protected.
Yeah, and you talked about just in general improvements, and I think. In general, I'm thinking now also as part of education, but also, a lot of our schools sometimes here in the San Fernando Valley, especially some of the Northeast ones, deal with pollution of all kinds.
That's right. That's right.
And what do you think yourself, as a potential member of Congress, how will you address some of the environmental justice and environmental impacts that our communities here in the San Fernando Valley have faced? For example, the Aliso Canyon, leak, as well as in Sun Valley, we've had issues with the power plant there as well. So how do you envision yourself assisting our communities when it comes to environmental justice?
That's such an important point around the intersectionality when it comes to public health. We talk about schooling and schools being in close proximity to fossil fuel sites, to power plants. Here in California, we don't even have a buffer zone from our residential neighborhoods to where you have fossil fuel sites. And that means that our low-income communities of color are breathing in these noxious chemicals each and every single day. That's impacting educational outcomes, and the fact that so many of our public schools, we haven't addressed the lead and the mold that's been growing for years and years and years. We need a Green New Deal for public housing and a Green New Deal for public education. Those are two bills in Congress that unfortunately the incumbent has not supported, but I absolutely support, and we got to get them enacted. And when it comes to the Sun Valley gas leak and Aliso Canyon, I was proud to stand with Angelica Duenas, who I know you all are going to have later on today. She's been protesting that for many, many years. It's an abomination that the city, people in those communities didn't even know that was happening. It was kept from the community for years and years as they were breathing that in. Same thing with Aliso, 109,000 metric tons of methane dumped into the air for weeks and weeks, and I don't know how many thousands more polytoxin chemicals. And not only has that site not been shut down, the methane storage has increased. And that was just this past December. I remember I submitted public comment. I spoke on the phone saying, you've had thousands of Valley residents reach out saying, we want this site permanently shut down. We do not need to increase storage to meet our energy needs when after the blowout, for several years, we were able to meet those energy needs without Aliso. So this is about maximizing corporate profit. Just like the higher gas prices we're seeing right now that are hurting our working class, middle income class folks, it's about maximizing corporate profit. And that's not the way it should be. We need to permanently shut it down at the federal level, not only fighting for a Green New Deal and those bills that I mentioned, but also fighting for a renewable electricity standard that excludes natural gas. Natural gas ain't clean energy. Our communities know that. We got to be able to take that fight and say, no, renewable energy means wind, it means solar, it means hydropower, it does not mean natural gas. We got to fully decarbonize our economy to prevent climate catastrophe.
Well, there's a lot of substance there to break down some more, but unfortunately we are just about out of time. But we do have enough time though to just ask you, just what are some final words that you want to leave our audience with? You have about 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, we live here in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. Poverty is a policy choice. As opposed to further investing in systems of oppression and in policing and incarceration in the military-industrial complex, let's bring that money back home, bring it back into our communities, into our small businesses, into our education programs, into housing and healthcare. That's what actually keeps us safe. And we are ground zero for so many crises, and our district is very progressive. We voted for Bernie Sanders in the 2020 primary. We deserve an unapologetic corporate-free progressive. I'm proud of all that we've achieved, all the mutual aid work that we've done, the over 270 local volunteers that we have, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit about the endorsements that we have here as well. We've been endorsed by Senator Nina Turner, by Brand New Congress, Center for Biological Diversity, Jewish Voice for Peace Action, Ground Game LA, Healthcare for All Los Angeles. We got several more that are coming through the pipe that we'll announce this next coming week. But it's about finally having representation that's invested in co-governance, working with and for communities to get these structural reforms enacted that we know we could achieve if it were not for political cowardice and corporate greed.
All right. So with that, we want to thank Shervin Aazami, candidate for U.S. Congress District 32, and of course thank Kaina Collins and Carlos Sanchez as well for being here with me, co-hosting. And on behalf of Valley Views KROJ, we want to just wish you the best, Shervin.
Appreciate you all.
Yes. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a quick musical break and be right back with our next candidate in the Meet the Candidates 2022 series.
Yo, it's Fernando. Shouts out to Valley Views, man. They played me on the station. I was like, let me make you a jingle. So this is my jingle I made for them. This is what I had to do. This is Valley Views. This is what I had to do. This is Valley Views. Got me singing like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want? Got me singing like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want? Got me singing like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want? Got me singing like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want? I wasn't tripping when I lost my job. No reason to lie to my mom. Now I've got 8, 9 to 5, y'all. I was like, right on. No work on weekends, eh? Waking up early, sleep at 8. I think I'm surely